Hi, my name is Dan Paulson. I'm an independent researcher, and I've recently discovered how solid the connection is that Jesus is a hero on a monomyth, on a common monomyth from antiquity. Now, the reason this is difficult to see, and everybody knows who and what Jesus is, so we're stepping into some pretty tough territory here. There's a lot of people that fight back and forth over Jesus' existence. If you knew what a monomyth was, you would look at that and go, okay, I got it. I see what's going on. It is a monomyth. The problem is this. People don't know what a monomyth is. If they did, they would see hundreds of them that you're already aware of from antiquity. There are many in the Bible. The monomyth starts with Noah. It goes to Abraham. It's going to go to Moses, Ezekiel, Daniel, more. Well, you know what? We have to start with monomyth. We have to grow into it. It's actually not a monomyth. There's more to that. There's a mono template. There's a template that is being used, whether it's mythology or religious genre of teaching. So I don't want to call it a monomyth because you look at religion and say that's not mythology, that's religion. However, the same template is in use. So it's not really a monomyth. What is that? One mythology. There's one template. That's what's more accurate. There's many myths and many religious stories built on the same template. That's what we're looking for, that single template. Jesus is a worshipped version of a hero of 1,000 faces. Okay, so in this video, there's a couple of things that I have to do, but I want to put out I need to reach out, okay? People need to ask me questions or talk to me or to engage with me. I need anybody who's interested to listen to this and go, excuse me, what about this? What about that? It's like I don't know what to do. It's so quiet that I sit back and go, damn, I'm doing it all wrong. I don't know how to proceed. It's like I'm talking to a brick wall, honestly. So I sit back and go, I don't know how to proceed. If there's anybody out there that's interested in the truth, that would like to understand this, please ask me questions. And if there's anybody that gets on here that's some nasty asshole on the thread, I'll just block them and get rid of them. I'm not going to tolerate supernaturalists or militant atheists that can't figure out what's going on. Okay, having said that, that's my desperate plea for help. Come on, we're being destroyed. Humanity is being trashed. Can we figure out what's going on? No, we can't. Humans don't figure it out. They don't take the time. All right. And it took me a long time to get here. However, now that I've got here, I can show the path. I've got behind the curtain and I know what this hero of 1,000 faces is. And I know that Jesus is a idol worship version of Jason and the Argonauts. Okay, look at this very quickly. I'm going to show you something conceptual from a handful of stories. This is on the template. All right, what I'm going to suggest is what we're going to be looking for here is conceptual ideas in the background that we'll talk through after I read through these. Here's a few examples of how that template is in view, but it's not easy to see. Jesus is called as the Son of God, has supernatural powers, travels with hand-picked disciples, and seeks the kingdom of heaven within. Jason from Greek mythology is called as the rightful ruler, has Hera for supernatural powers, travels with the Argonauts, and seeks the golden fleece. King Arthur, this is more recent, Welsh, probably only 500 years old or something like that. King Arthur is called as the only one who could extract Excalibur, has Merlin for supernatural powers, travels with hand-picked knights, and seeks the Holy Grail. Now, if you look, you can find videos on George Lucas and him using the monomyth for the first 3 Star Wars. And I'll bring that monomyth up here in a second from Joseph Campbell. But here it is. Luke is called as the son of Vader, has the Force for supernatural powers, travels with special selected rebels, and seeks to save the Alliance. Okay, you might look at that and think that it doesn't sound like much. It's a storyline. But what there is actually there is a template. And those are the easier things to see along the way. Other places where you would see the template in use would be that it should be pretty visible, but it's kind of obscure to people despite knowing both of these stories incredibly well. That is in Exodus, when Moses crosses the Red Sea and spends 40 years in the desert. Jesus is baptized and then spends 40 days in the wilderness. That those are both repeating motifs, but they're conceptual. And, there's just many layers to this, so just stick with it. A conceptual thing would be like me saying, if I was telling you you had bats in your belfry, I've got two analogs in use there, bats and belfry, but the concept of that is what? There's something wrong up with your head. That's the concept in there. So the verbiage is that's what we're looking for. Whenever something is said, what is that hidden concept inside of the verbiage? And it's very old stuff, very purposeful, so it's going to be a little tough for us to unwrap from it all. In this video, I'm going to account for the missing years of Jesus too. That's something that is a common motif in other stories. I'll show an example in this one. Okay. So first of all, we can't talk about Jesus really being a monomyth character until we know what a monomyth is. So let me bring up Joseph Campbell's work here first. And before I do, what the pattern that you see here, the steps that he has identified, he identified it by doing what I just did here. We put some myths side by side and started looking for repeating concepts. There's a called person, called person, called person. Oh, supernatural. At some point they have or get supernatural aid or have access to supernatural aid along the way. So there's a calling, Joseph Campbell has a denial of the call. That's not always there. There's also a gathering of resources, the supernatural aid, the gathering up of the people. That's something that Joseph Campbell didn't identify. So we're going to look at this monomyth, or what he calls the monomyth, and I'm going to tell you that there's more to it. This is how he's got it identified, but we're going to take it much further than this. What I'm going to tell you is that there's something very mentally interactive in this material if you interpret it at the deepest layer. The template is based on common stages of a human life cycle, and that is what we're going to go after. Now, let's take a look at Joseph Campbell's template that was used for this, how he identified it. Then we're going to go deeper. He doesn't have the entire template, and he doesn't have it in plain language yet. All right, let me just talk through it real quickly. These are the 17 stages of the Joseph Campbell's monomyth. Now, I want you to know that 17 stages is not fixed. These are just basic ones. It can be much bigger than this, actually. In fact, let's pull up the oldest one in the Bible itself. It's in Genesis. It's the flood story, Noah. This one is super short, really short. Take a look at this. What we have in chapter 6 is where the destruction happens, when God needs to destroy the earth. At this point, he hasn't called Noah yet. All it says is, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah, and he begat sons. So it starts a lineage there, but it goes on the destruction. Not until chapter 7, and the Lord said unto Noah, come. So right here, number 7, we have the calling. That's the calling right there. There's no denial of the call. Noah doesn't deny it. He goes right on through the healing process. And at the end of chapter 8 to chapter 9, we get down here to the end of chapter 9, and all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Then it's going to start over into a lineage, and then the Babel split from the past, and then the entire sequence start over with Abram and Sarai again. But here we had, 2 steps? 7, 8, 3, 7, 8, 9. Yep, there you have it. And what we have here is a stop and turn inward healing cycle. Call to adventure starts right here. This is where we, if we are the person that's going to do it, are called. We become the called person. We are the one that's going to take the journey, because this is an inward journey. So if you take this journey, then you're the called person. If not, you can just carry the adventure, not knowing it's an inward path. So that called hero is you. If you are on the adventure, that's how this works. You're the person that says, I got some hurt inside that keeps messing up my life. I'm going to go in, turn inward, and resolve it. Not many people are going to do it, and it's going to be hard to do. That's why we run into next the refusal of the call. We don't always see a refusal of the call. Stoics, Greek myth, things like that. There's, just get it done. You don't wishy-washy around it. Just go take care of it. Jesus is not going to refuse the call. Moses will. We're going to see Moses on Mount Horeb when God says, you must lead my people. And he says, I don't even speak right. So there's a calling and a refusal right there. We get past that, though. Supernatural aid, that's where Moses gets his staff too, doesn't he? But there's supernatural aid that is somehow a part of the process. We just saw that in our examples. Jesus came bundled with it. Merlin had it. Luke learned it. All of that. Okay, crossing the first threshold. Now we have something here that is that river crossing. We might see it in a story about the river Styx, or crossing the Red Sea, or having a baptism, or Joshua has to cross the Euphrates. In Ezekiel, crossing the river Chebar. And that's not the only way to cross a threshold. There's going through doorways, portals, narrow gates. All of those are crossing, and you see it's a first threshold, crossing a first threshold. And then belly of the whale, road of trials, meeting with the goddess. So the story is following along in this way, that you're going to have a call to adventure. Luke, he gets the videos. Refusal of the call. Luke doesn't refuse. But what happens? Uncle Owen says, no, you can't go. But then something happens. He gets to go anyway. Supernatural aid. What happens? He goes to Dagobah to train on the Force with Yoda, crossing the first threshold. I'm not sure where that one ends up being and what happens, but Lucas said, yep, this is what he used to follow it. Now, I'm going to tell you ahead of time with the Jesus material, crossing the first threshold in one of the Gospels is going to be the baptism. That is where he turns inward, where we would turn inward, and then where the rest of the entire ministry is the adventure inside the mind. It's held as a ministry, though, instead of an adventure. In fact, what I've got up on the screen here is that adventure. This is how it would be written in a myth. This is the voyage of the Argo, Greek myth, Jason and the Argonauts. Starting at step number 1, where Jason is called. Then there's going to be things that happen along the way. There's a number of steps, and then they finally go through the clashing rocks. As they go through the clashing rocks, that's equal to that's the crossing of the threshold right there. Like, they go through the clashing rocks, barely making it. They need Hera's help. Moses runs through the Red Sea with the Israelites, barely making it. They need God's help. Those are conceptually the exact same point. That's where the template is. The stories are just different. One of them is meant to be a mythological adventure. The other one is meant to be a miracle story that you worship and live by. Here, metaphor using analogs. This is how we can say one thing in a lot of different ways. An anchored ship cannot sail. The dog tied in the yard cannot escape. The goat tied in the field cannot run away. In all cases, you put yourself into the story. I'm the ship that's anchored. I'm the dog that's tied. I'm the goat that's chained. Whatever I'm hanging on to, I can't escape from. So that's what they're doing in the stories here. They sound different on the outside, but conceptually, they're the same. My example was highly simple. All right, one of the things that Joseph Campbell doesn't have identified here, but it's a good time to bring it up, is cyclical pain. He didn't identify a stage that was cyclical pain. Cyclical pain is the reason that we go on the adventure, because we look at our life and go, I'm tired of this happening over and over again. So there's going to be some element. If we go to the Argonautica story, what we find is that they go to the island where Phineas is, and the harpies are defiling his food every day. It's a weird thing. He needs help. He needs them to destroy it. This represents the cyclical pain. That cyclical pain element, there's something that's happening that has to be resolved. What happens is the twins go after them, and Zeus tells them, leave them alone. They won't hurt you anymore again. So the harpies are allowed to live, but not hurt you anymore. That's going to be another common motif, where the enemy is trapped under a net, put in the ground, something like that. All of those represent your memory is still there, but it's no longer effective anymore. So that cyclical pain element is there. You go to an island, and that's how the story goes. You go to the next island, cyclical pain. Then you go to the next island, it's a struggle to leave the past. Those are going to be the elements that we see in the Argonautica story. Again, we see them struggling to leave the island of the women or the island of the old gods, depending on the version. In The Moses story, we see Pharaoh saying, you can go, no you can't. You can go, no you can't. You can go, no you can't. Both of those are conceptually holding the idea that it's a struggle to leave. I got to get out of here. I didn't make it. I got to quit this. I didn't. Maybe one more day, one more time. We're struggling. We're caught in a failure cycle. And that's why we have to turn inward to heal. We have to go after what the original core belief is that's causing us to continue to cycle in that way. There's something that needs to be resolved in our mind. Now, that very pathway is held in the story, in the adventure, from step to step to step. What do? You go defeat this, you turn inward, you defeat the deeper stuff. You need to go where? You have to go to you have to sail to the far side of the world to get the golden fleece. That's the far side of your world. That's the beginning of your time. Like Jesus is going to say, to get to the kingdom of heaven within, do so like a child. Back at the beginning of time, back when you were Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden before things went awry. Anyway, as we get into the Jesus material and you go from town to town, from place to place, it's kind of like it's like island hopping, stage to stage to stage. When we get into Jesus material, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be following the same staging pattern along here, except instead of sailing, they're walking. If you were to read the book of Joshua, 24 chapters, 24 steps on the monomyth template. What's Ezekiel? Ezekiel has 48. That's a lot more steps. Genesis has 50. But if you just saw that, you look at this pattern right here, island to island to island, look at the Bible, go chapter to chapter to chapter, and just put them in the same sort of visual in your mind, in your imagination. That's what you're doing when you're going from chapter to chapter. You're going from island to island, except you're doing so on foot. You're looking for the kingdom of heaven within instead of the golden fleece. Magic flight. There's a point out here, crossing the return threshold. In Jesus material, what does that happen? When he crosses the return threshold is when he emerges from the tomb. 3 days in the tomb. That was the threshold he crossed, the door of the tomb. Anyway, okay, so this is the 17 stages of the Joseph Campbell monomyth. Now, if you made a story on this, you could just do that. You could make a monomyth using this. I'm gonna have some kind of a hero. But this hero can't be just an average person out of the crowd. The person has to be special. And the reason is because there are many, many different types of people on the planet, and only certain ones are going to do it. So you can't just have this as some blasé individual from the background. It's not. This is an adventure person right here. This is a person that's going to be very introverted, contemplative, sensitive, empathetic, is bothered by their issues and want to turn inward. This is going to be, so you have to make that a person like that. It's not just any Joe. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. They don't always make it this obvious. This one is old. This is Babylonian, the Enuma Elish. This is Marduk, the called hero. He's the one that's going to come and kick ass, take names, rebuild the world. This is ourselves as we turn inward. The called hero is here. Coincidentally, in Genesis, Marduk takes the place of Noah, or Noah takes the place of Marduk. And if you were to count the times Marduk's name is repeated here in the Enuma Elish, it's 41 times. Noah's name in Genesis, 41 times. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of sharing going on. So perfect that his head was twice as lofty as any other god. Rising high above them, he was the better by every measure. Both his arms and legs were well formed beyond comparison, so that it could not be fathomed, almost incomprehensible. Moreover, he possessed 4 ears to hear and 4 eyes to see. Red flames leapt forth whenever he opened his mouth. His 4 ears were also considerable, of voluminous size, and his eyes, which were capable of perceiving anything, being unsurpassed among the gods of exceptional build, having limbs which were mighty and a body terrifically tall. Okay, that doesn't mean we suddenly become these big physical creatures. That's not what is there. That is spiritually. You're going to stand up and say, nope, bullshit. I don't care. Nope, I'm done. You're going to have that. When you get done, you're going to say, that's it. I am here. I'm solid. So I think this is a characteristic of that personality, and it has to do with value systems, that there's this very open and easygoing and, yeah, I'll let anything go. Whatever you want. Yeah, it's fine. I'm easygoing. You do what you want. You do what you want. But there's a point where if somebody hits a value system, suddenly a wall goes up. And that wall isn't like negotiable. It becomes very solid. No, I said no. This is not okay. There's a wall. People might even, they've looked at me before and what's your problem? I never tell you no. It's like, well, you know what? I don't violate your value systems, but if you violate mine, you're going to hear about it. I don't go there. You're going to be that person. But the ears, the awareness, the size, this is somebody with a larger perception. This is that introverted feeler that's on the outskirts of the group that has a larger spatial awareness as well. So they're kind of isolating that kind of person. If you were to write a story, you have to take that into account. This is a special person, not an average Joe. They might start out seeming, they do. You have to start out seeming like an average Joe, but you're not. You rise above it. Here's an example that made it into Jewish material. This is from Jeremiah 1:5. Before I formed you in the belly, I knew you, and before you came forth out of the womb, I sanctified you, and I ordained you a prophet unto the nations. Now, to understand this, it is a brain type. There's a certain person, and the prophet unto the nations is what? The nations are my life experience. Am I going to be in charge of it, or is it going to be in charge of me? Most people live their life without realizing it, just functioning through their memories and what comes up. They're not really, they're bouncing off the screen of life instead of getting behind the projector. Instead of projecting the life they want, they're experiencing life based on what they observe. So there's a certain person that's going to say, nope, I'm not living that way. I'm going to step back and I'm going to be in charge of my own life experience. That's the prophet unto the nations. The prophet is the called person, the sage, the guru in Jewish lingo. It's held in a different way. But in the same way, people don't think they're going to be gurus or sages. People don't think they're going to be prophets, but they're all the same thing with different languages. Okay, but what is this? It's a special selection of an individual. We're going to have Moses put in a basket. We're going to have Jesus taken to Egypt. We're going to find times where the people are selected out somehow. That's where that selection comes in, where we see it come in. Fair warning, and you have to think this through. This isn't... If you do write a story, you have to make sure that the called hero is a male, and that whoever he gets, like Leia or something like that, is a female. You cannot... Sometimes people want to write the story different somehow. It doesn't work. And the reason why we don't connect with those is because what is happening in the story is actually also a mental hierarchy that is from a patriarchal society. The male is in charge. Now, if you're the called hero, you just have to remember this. Your consciousness is the male. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. And your inner self is the female. So we have to turn them around a little bit. But if you're writing a story, if you deviate from that, people will go, that was a stupid story. If you stick with it, people will go, wow, I really connected with that for some reason. Notice how we connected with the first 3 Star Wars, and the other ones were just like, they were kind of cool, but you didn't get caught up in it and feel moved by it. So yeah, they have to maintain, when you read the stories, they're in that mental hierarchy. The refusal of the call, maybe, maybe not. Supernatural aid, yeah, put that in there. How do you get that? Crossing the first threshold. Now you have to go across something. You could have maybe some bridge or something or maybe the remains of a bridge somewhere that, you cross that and people will look later and go, oh, that bridge was really there. It must have really happened. I'll keep using the example of the Voyage of the Argo because it's small and it has everything in there. It's very compact. Okay, so there's a point where there's 2 thresholds crossed. Jason first crosses a river and loses a sandal and meets up with Pelias, where Pelias is. Pelias represents the early self. So we've turned inward and met up and said, guess what? I'm taking over. And the inner self is like, well, I don't think so. If you want to, you're going to have to go get that golden fleece. And then in order to go get that, you're going to have to go through the clashing rocks. So you've turned inward and faced yourself. But what are the clashing rocks? That's where the bad nasties are. I can turn inward and talk about my memories all day long until it comes to this dark place over here. You don't get there. That's the clashing rocks. So there's 2 thresholds to cross. You'll see that show up in that story there. It's wonderful. It's sequenced right up. Anyway, okay, so I don't know if you're following how that works. That's how you would create a story on the monomyth. But what this really is me. Call to adventure. That's me saying, I'm done. Refusal of the call. Damn it, this is going to be hard to do. Supernatural aid. There is nothing supernatural. So what this represents is knowing what to do. I'm going to have to change some frequencies in my head. What are the frequencies? The forgiveness. Things have happened. I got raped. I got molested. I've done things. I've had things happen. I've made judgments. My life is screwed up. I'm stuck in some pattern that's just, ugh. The supernatural aid is, what do you do? What do you do now? You're stuck there. How do you get out of it? Crossing the first threshold, you got to turn into your memories. You see how these become mentally interactive when you take them all the way down to what they are. It's a human cycle. Turning inward is turning into your memories. The place where you want to hide things away, yeah, they're screwing up your life. You got to go after it. You got to cross that threshold to go after it. Belly of the whale, you're in there with them. Road of trials, you're going to be struggling with them. Meeting with the goddess, this is your inner self that has just got totally trashed with your judgments. So here's basically what happens. Let's step back away from the template for a minute and take a look at something. The human is born. Take a look at your own life. You're born and you start out as a child and everything is fine to begin with. You can become anything. We go along life, though, not knowing it, and we lose our happiness and we begin to live through our judged memories. The things that we experience in life, that we've judged them and remember them with emotion. Stored away in our brain, they become a part of us and we begin to live through that mass of bundles right there. And at some point, we might feel, a certain person might go, okay, I get that. I'm living through my freaking perceptions. I have to go inward and change my perceptions and let things go in order to feel better about my life. Right there is when the monomyth starts, when that person turns inward because they've got cyclical pain. So what Joseph Campbell missed was everything from birth all the way up to that point. There are templates in here that cover those as well. If we were to go to Genesis, this is the simplest one. It's the shortest one. It's very early. It was looking very much like a Babylonian creation myth, where there's one destruction that happens and everything is okay, you rebuild. That's what happens here in Genesis 2. When the truth of it is, we're going to have to go in over and over again, so the stories are going to get much bigger. However, in Genesis, it's super small. There's 3 different templates. The first one is chapter 1 and 2, creation. That's the birth of each of us. That's not going to repeat. If you went to Greek myth, you would find that there's, the earliest gods, there's a creation. No matter what myth or religion, if you go upstream to the beginning of them, there's going to be a creation. That creation will not repeat, but everybody has a creation. So that piece is there. He did not identify that. That is us being born and coming online and learning that cause and effect is what drives life, and that we're going to lose our happiness and we're going to start living through our memories unless we become aware of that. So what happens in the story is it moves along then. We go from Adam and Eve, our cyclical pain comes in, the idea that you will have continual pain in childbirth. This is, again, metaphorical. Childbirth means that it's like thistles from the garden emerging again. Childbirth coming, pain in childbirth, thistles from the garden. Something is emerging that is not good because of judgment that's been made. Cyclical pain elements are there. We're going to go all the way up to the point to where the flood needs to happen. Life has to be destroyed. That right there is a human life template. That is the human life template. Now up front, there's a selected person. If you went to the Argonautica story, you're going to see very short. Jason is a child. They're going to make reference to this. There's an oracle that tells Polias what happened, that Jason was hidden out. He was not killed. Polias wants the land. Polias represents the mind, the early self. I want to live and control life. However, Jason represents the part of you later that goes, I'm tired of my life. I'm tired of it. I'm going to go in and face my early self. Jason facing Polias is us facing our early self. Crossing that river to meet up with him is turning inward. Okay, but the oracle tells him that when Jason returns, he's going to be a man with one sandal. At some point, what you see here is that Jason is selected out, and then there's no story about Jason's life. There's no story about his life. When it's time to go on the adventure, he shows up. There is no Jason. There's no reason to create that story. When we get to Jesus, that's exactly what they're replicating. Jesus is a called individual that's going to be on a specific type of a monomyth. A religious genre of a monotemplate, actually, is what the deal is. And that he is selected out as we're told to begin with. There's a special person, but we don't have a life for him. He's just going to come back when it's time for the adventure to begin and pick right up. So that's what's happening there. There was no place Jesus went. Jesus is a monomyth character. Where did Jason go? Where did Ezekiel go? Where did any of them go? If you start looking at the stories, you'll realize there's something missing from them. Where did they all come from? Where did all of them come from? They're picked out, but when it's time to go on the adventure, it's time to go on the adventure. Places you will find a replication of the human life cycle is in Genesis, where it starts in chapter 12, where Abram and Sarai are called and put in Canaan, the land of famine. That also replicates the beginning of a human life. However, it doesn't repeat creation. It just starts here again. But what happens? We get corrupted and we move along. Not until when Abram becomes Abraham does the calling happen. So that entire section from Abram and Sarai all the way up to becoming Abraham and Sarah is that early life cycle. In the same way, Adam and Eve goes all the way up to it's time for the destruction. It's time for Noah to get called. That means you become Noah. In the second version, it is now you are shifting from becoming Abram and Sarai to turning inward and be going, I'm turning inward. I've shifted to become Abraham and Sarah now. And they play out in the mind, in the psyche, in the theater of the mind in an analogous manner that way. So it makes it very difficult to see. So I don't, people that is trying to account for Jesus, I know that's a big thing. There's big stuff on it. I made a comment on another channel. I can't remember the guy's name, Paul something or other. He's got all kinds of stuff up on the Jesus, all this kind of stuff. People don't know what to do with monomyths, but you know what? Actually, they know how to make money off of fantastical stories. Talking about Jesus going to, going to learn from gurus and sages over in India is really kind of on a par in my mind with saying, the Egyptians couldn't have built the pyramids, or, aliens have been around, or something like that. It goes into foil hat area where you're like, come on, yeah. And there are people who believe it, who say Jesus didn't go anywhere. He just stayed there as a carpenter. There's no reason to have a story. He wasn't called yet. But you look at it and go, it's a monomyth. There wasn't a Jesus. And if there was a Jesus, this person here in this story is a monomyth character. And, really what's happening is that people learn enough things to see some common things, and they're seeing template parts, but they don't understand that's what it is. If you go into Hindu material and you learn about the third eye, and then you come back and read Jesus and go, something about clearing out the mote in your eye to help the brother clear out theirs, and suddenly links are being made between, this mystical link between Jesus and Christian material back to mystical early Hindu material or something like that. And really what this is the eye of perception. It's the bundle of memories that we're looking through. And no matter what culture you go through, they've got some manner of saying that. In the Tao Te Ching, we're going to see naming is the origin of 10,000 things. That's us making choices and becoming a bundle of memories like that. It's put in very unique verbiage compared to what we hear in a religious genre. In Genesis, here's where that shows up. It's a recurring motif, so you can see where the cycle is happening. Every time God tells somebody, this is your land, I give it to you and all of your offspring, for as many as there are, as it can be counted, as many as stars in the sky or sand on the beach or something like that. That's the same bundle right there, held in a very different way, but this is going to become yours. You can have whatever. These are the decisions you make. That's why it's your land. But it's your perception. It's the way you perceive life through that eye. So when you have people talking about things like that, Jesus has, we'll say, the mote out of your eye, but he's got another one that tells you to do the exact same thing that sounds completely different. Take the mote out of your eye. Forgive the ought against your brother. In both cases, it's the mass of memories that we're holding, that we're living through. He also says to become poor in spirit. Same thing, get rid of that mass. So we can see actually that there is a repeating motif in the background about spiritual healing if one interprets the verse at a mental level as opposed to worshiping it from a distance and saying, this really happened. Let's go follow his trail and his path. When you're doing that, you're carrying it. If you stop and go, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to open this up and look inside. That means I'm going to enter the narrow gate. I'm going to take this and I'm going to become this person and I'm going to go on this adventure. I'm going to go on a healing adventure. And that's how a monomyth works. The Jesus monomyth is the same thing, except that it's, oh boy, it's going to be totally sacrilegious to say I am at this point in time in my life the Jesus character, and then I'm going to go through these experiences, and when I'm reemerge, I'm going to be a Christ character, which is like starting out as a Buddha and then going through enlightenment, and then or you're starting out as Siddhartha and then going through enlightenment, and then you become the Buddha, and everybody has a Buddha nature. So it's the same concept. Anyway, oh well, that's the way. There was a long time ago I didn't see it. I mean, I kept going at it, figuring it out, understanding it, actually engaging with it, realizing it's an inward path. I had a bad life. Let me go in and work on these memories. Let me try this stuff. It says if I fix this stuff, my life is better, and it worked. Yeah, it did. My life improved after resolving the issues, as opposed to the secret thing that says forget about the issues and just look for a good life. You know what? You're always looking for a good life. Get rid of the baggage and it'll happen automatically. They don't teach you that. They just tell you to try hard to pull along with your anchors. You know what? Let go of the anchors and you'll flow naturally right into it. You have to, and it's a thinking process. You got to control your thoughts. You have to become aware of your thinking. You have to really be on top of it. Anyway, okay, I'm getting off subject here. We have a teaching that is common, that is a psychological teaching that tells us how we came about, where we come from, how we experience life, how we have cyclical pain, and then how we must go in and defeat those enemies, turning inward, crossing the threshold. All of them, mythologies, religions, all of them are going to be following that same template. Even if the religions are different, you got to look at them differently. There's something else going on. The religions and myths are carrying cases, all of them. Yet enter the narrow gate and you'll see that outward, many ways lead to destruction. Outward is what? Looking out to God out there, not knowing God is the higher awareness we connect with here. Okay, questions, comments? I'd appreciate some questions. Yeah, if I said anything that sparks any interest and you'd like to know more about it, I would appreciate being able to engage with somebody on something. I'm just kind of floating out here, not sure what to do. All right. Hope it was interesting, and boy, I hope it goes somewhere. Take care. See you in the next video.